Those getting ready to retire, in retirement, or potentially after retirement are looking at having to take RMDs eventually, or maybe you're already in the situation. RMDs, what the heck are they? Well, they're required minimum distributions. It's what the government says on a pre-tax account you're going to have to start to take, regardless if you need the money or not. Well, JP Morgan did a study, and just to give you an idea where this video came from, I actually saw Erin Talks Money, super great channel. She had a lot of great content on there, and her video really broke down the article and then some different things for it. I'm going to take a little spin on this, and what I'm going to talk about with JP Morgan here is their research and some of the things that they considered, but I'm also going to start to talk through the things they didn't consider and maybe why you shouldn't spend all of your RMD or even more than the RMD that you're already getting. So there's a lot of different ways to look at this here. But JP Morgan, they put this together and they said that, and this was in a Yahoo Finance article that related to it, 31,000 people were reviewed. They were all approaching or in retirement. 84% of those evaluated were already at RMD age, and they were only taking the minimums. 80% of retirees prior to RMD age had not taken any distributions. So those that had retired but weren't at RMD required minimum distribution age weren't all taking it. So when is required minimum distribution age? If you're asking, 72 to 75, depending on your birth date. So there's a lot of ranges there. The government's done a lot of changes when it comes to the required minimum distribution age. So with that also, they really started to talk about this in the research and said that, the RMD basically doesn't allow enough income to meet the person's needs. Well, that's correct, but maybe people aren't taking the RMD or a lot more than the RMD for a reason. Because if you're only taking the minimum, obviously you're going to continue to grow that account, hopefully. There's a lot of different strategies that people talk about, the 4% rule and all these other things on what you need. But if you've done a financial plan, potentially you've got Social Security, maybe you have a pension, maybe you have all these other things that I'll get into here in a minute. But really what we're looking at here and what JP Morgan was talking about was the concerns and why maybe you should be taking more than just your RMD. And they say that, first of all, just what I had mentioned a second ago was you can't only live on the required minimum distribution. The government basically says that you have to take a little bit at, let's say, age 72. As you progress and get older, you're going to have to take more out. The reason for that is they want to collect as much tax as they can over time, but they're basing it on mortality tables, meaning that you're not going to have to take it all at once. They're projecting you to live a little while, so they don't want to look at this and say, hey, you know what, take it all out today, and then, hopefully you'll have money still for the end of the time. That's not the way they want to do it. They want to space this out a little bit at 72 or 75 when it starts, and then as you get older, they're going to increase the percentages that you have to take out. And so the concern there with JP Morgan, you can't live on just the RMD. The second thing is there will be significant money at the end of the plan remaining. Potentially that's a good thing. I don't know what your plans are there, but we'll talk about that one here in a minute. And then something though that they didn't really mention that I'm going to say is a concern is if you aren't taking more than the RMD, you should be doing some sort of financial planning to strategize, because if you have a large pre-tax account, when I'm talking a pre-tax account, I'm talking a 401k that you never paid taxes on. You put all of your money in and have never paid taxes on. Rollover IRAs, traditional IRAs, 403bs, 457 accounts, any of these that are not Roth, or if you have brokerage accounts, individual accounts, things like that, those don't count. So I'm only talking pre-tax here. If you have that and you build that up, and a lot of people have the bulk of their assets in these pre-tax accounts, if you hit Medicare age, you're going to have to start, watching your income, because there's going to be thresholds. And if you cross those thresholds, you're going to have to pay more in taxes, or actually more in Medicare. It's going to be a Medicare expense. It's the IRMA tax when it comes to the Medicare side of things. So be very careful here, because what ends up happening is at age 65, you're just going right along, you have no issues. Well, then maybe at age 72 or 75, you have to start taking the required minimum distributions. If you haven't taken enough from that, then what ends up happening is the government says you have to take an extra amount out. Well, let's say you have a pension that pays you $100,000 a year, and let's just say that you have Social Security that pays you $30,000 a year, and then now you have this RMD you're required to take, and let's just say you have a large taxable account. Maybe that puts you at $50,000 in an RMD. Well, guess what? Now you're at a point where you're going to have to pay more on the IRMA penalty. If you're a single filer for 2024, I believe the numbers are roughly 103,000, the income bracket. So if you're over 103,000, you're going to have to pay more for Medicare tax. Just kind of trying to show you that was not a concern that was presented in the article, but that's another one there. Now what I want to do is really flip this a little bit, because as I said, Aaron Talks Money did a great job talking about the article, breaking it all down and educating. She was excellent at that. I love how she presented it. I watched it and said, you know what? Wow, she's got some great ideas here, but I want to spin this as we do here at Jazz and kind of get a little bit more geeky on something and go into a few other things of what I think that was not discussed in the research that we should really be looking at and as far as the planning goes. The number one thing that we want to talk about is long-term care. If you have not done a financial plan and figured for long-term care, if you've watched me long enough, you understand I am not a fan of insurance. But when it comes to long-term care expenses, you do have to have some sort of plan. Does dementia run in your family? Do you have family that's hopefully going to take care of you if something were to happen? All of these different questions that start to come into play are something that you've got to consider. Well, let's just take a look here. And this is Retired Roger. Retired Roger, I built out a financial plan. And just going through the basics of the scenario, his probability of success in retirement is 100%, and he would have $855,000 projected at the end of the plan. Now, the problem is if Retired Roger says, hey, you know what? I've got, long-term care. I'm going to have to go into a nursing home the last 2 years based on national averages of $116,800 a year for nursing home care. You're looking at, a significant amount of money hitting the plan when you start to increase that by inflation. So in our plan, we're looking at a 5% increase for healthcare because healthcare consistently goes up a lot higher than general inflation. It's what we've seen here. So now he only has an 82% probability of success. We can even come back even farther and stress test the plan and really start to look at things and say, okay, he's got an 82% probability of having $445,000 remaining, but he's got to live quite a while. This guy's 65 years old, projecting to live until he's 90 years old. What's going to happen for this time frame? If the markets fall, where will this take us? So if the market drops 20% immediately, he drops down to a 66.5% probability of success. As an advisor, I'm not one to tell you, hey, that's a great number there. You want to make sure that you're looking, I tell people 70 to 80 we can work with, 80 to 90 is the sweet spot, and 90 to 100, I do try to encourage you to spend a little bit more. But just looking at this is a Monte Carlo. It runs 1,000 different scenarios to give you an idea of a median line to really say, hey, how much will potentially be there at the end of the plan? And so that's giving you that breakdown there. So that's number one, long-term care. Number two, though, let's talk through this for a minute. And it's really just the idea that you don't need the money. If you don't need the money, that's okay. Maybe they're just not taking the RMD or not draining the IRA before they hit the RMD age because they don't need the money. Number three is having a financial plan showing the proper withdrawal at the proper time. Let me show you this one because this is something that they didn't really talk through when it comes to the JP Morgan article here in their research. What they missed on this was really just wanting to present some numbers and showing some things, but they really didn't want to educate, or in my opinion on this, because we're looking at a withdrawal rate here. If you were to just say, well, you know what? They should be taking more money out of their IRA accounts. Well, maybe they have a financial plan that's built on the side and they worked with an advisor, or maybe they did it on their own and they found a way to figure this out. And they said, you know what? My best withdrawal strategy is taking from a brokerage account first, taxable accounts, then a tax deferred account, then a tax-free account. In this situation right here, in Retired Roger's situation that I had built out, the bulk of his assets are in pre-tax dollars, but he had a little bit of a brokerage account. In this scenario, if he said, I'm going to pull from my IRA first, which is what the article was kind of addressing, the concern people weren't doing. So if he were to do that and say, you know what, they're right, I'm going to start pulling from my IRA first, it would cost... That was weird. If you were to take from the tax-deferred account, first, what's going to end up happening is it's costing him $261,924. The reason for that is all on the withdrawal strategy. So maybe these people aren't actually trying to sit there and say, hey, I'm just not going to take money out of my IRA, but they actually have a financial plan that's built into that. Another thing that we're talking about here, and the number 4 thing, is legacy planning. What are they doing there, and what is the legacy? Now, I get it. You're probably going to roast me on this in the comments and say, well, but it's all going to be taxable dollars for whoever's inheriting it. And you are absolutely correct on that. But what we've got to figure on here is, again, going back to this plan, this is tax adjusted ending dollars. If he were to do the plan and take from the pre-tax account first, he would have $261,000 tax adjusted less to leave his heirs. So even though you're thinking one way, sometimes you have to run through the financial plan to show you the actual way on this. Another option here is number 5. Maybe these people are considering a qualified charitable distribution, QCD. So once you hit 70 and a half years old for the year of 2024, you can give up to $105,000 out of a pre-tax account, it not show as income to you. You're not going to get a deduction on that money when it comes to your filing your taxes, but you never show income on it whatsoever. So maybe they're wanting to be a little charitable on this scenario, or possibly in the same situation when it comes to this charitable scenario here. Maybe they're just saying, hey, you know what? I'm going to leave whatever is left to, a charity, and it's not anything to do with a tax strategy. So there's a lot of things that come into play there. Another one is number 7, and that's the pension. What if they have a pension? I just got off the phone with a client who has a pension, they have a pre-tax account, and they have a brokerage account. Now, with their pension and their Social Security, that's meeting almost all of their needs. They have to take their RMD, but they don't need to take more. Now, maybe there's going to be some planning that we look at, because this is somebody that's just coming on with Jazz, and we're going to be able to help them and strategize there to see if there's any opportunity that we can find. But in this current scenario right this second, they don't actually need the money. So maybe that's what this comes to, is they have other income that's meeting their needs there. And then number 7, they never did proper planning, or maybe they did do the proper planning as we showed before. So there's a lot of scenarios here of why somebody is not taking the RMD. It's not just on this one thing. So let me know. Maybe you can go back and watch Aaron Talks Money. As I say, it's a great informational video. Let me know your thoughts on both of these videos in the comments below.